My name is Andy, and this is the second video in a short series that I'm doing about integrating Autogen with the new OpenAI GPT Assistant API. So just a reminder, just like the first video, this is brand new stuff. This was released earlier this week, so there might be some bugs, some bumps along the way, so please bear with me, and we'll see if we can get this working. So, what I want to focus on in this video is function calling. If you have taken a look at the OpenAI web interface for creating assistants, you've seen that you can do a couple of interesting things with them. You can give them custom instructions, of course, and you can also give them files that they can reference when you ask it questions, and you can also give your assistant function definitions for functions that they can call. And so that's what I want to go over in this video, is just to show you some short code that you should be able to get working to call functions locally on your system. So let's dive right on in. Here we are in Visual Studio Code. So I am on a Mac, so I'm going to hit Command-Shift-P and type in new terminal, and I'm going to start a new terminal here. Now, first thing that you're going to want to do, just like last time, is we are going to create a new Conda environment for our project. So I'm going to paste this right on in here. You can see I'm specifying a name for our environment, Autogen_YT, and I am specifying this version of Python that I want to use, 3.11.3. So I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to go ahead and ask me if I would like to proceed and install these things. So of course, yes. Now, if you followed my first video, you will probably already have an environment by this name installed. That's fine. When you do this step, it's going to ask, hey, do you want me to overwrite this? You can say yes or no. For the purposes of this video, it doesn't really matter that much. So our new environment has been created, and the next thing that we need to do is activate it. It's giving us instructions on how to do that right here. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in, conda activate Autogen YT, and now our new conda environment is active. So the next thing I want to do is, just to make sure I get the package management right, I'm going to find out which exact version of Python this environment is using and where it's located on my file system. So here it is. It is located in this directory that is specific to my environment. So I'm going to go ahead and install Autogen using it. Now, just like last time, I want to point out that this is installing a specific version of PyAutogen. PyAutogen equals 0.2.0b5. If you're following along, that's the version that you're going to want. So I'm going to go ahead and get that installed. And perfect, it is now installed. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to set up some API keys that this project can use. So I'm going to say new file, and I will call this file OAI_config_list. And I have some handy API keys right here. I'm going to throw those in there, and just like last time, yes, I am going to revoke these keys before publishing this video, so no need to worry about that. Now, the second thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to make another new file, and I am going to call it functions.py. So this is where we're going to put all of the functions that our GPT Assistant is going to use. So I have some code ready to go. I'm going to copy and paste that in here, and I'm going to go over the salient points. So you can see here on line 8, we are defining something called console print schema. Now, this is just a little bit of JSON that your assistant can use to learn about the function that you want it to call and to know how to call it. So we are giving this a name, console print API, and here are some properties in this function definition. The most important thing here in this properties object, we have something called words. we can see that words is of type string, and we have a description for words. These are words you would like to print to the console. And then down here at the end, you can see that we have an array of required items. And you can see that words is one of the required items. Now, if I scroll down here a little bit, we can actually see the definition for this console print function. So console print, just like we stated above, it takes an argument called words. It takes those words and it just prints them to the console, and it returns a string saying, yes, we've printed things. So again, in this file, we have our JSON description of the function that we would like our assistant to call. This JSON description has a name, it specifies some parameters, it specifies the arguments to the function, and it also specifies which of those arguments are required, if any. So, with that out of the way, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make another new file. I'm going to call this function calls. Function calls.py. Hit enter, and I have, again, some code ready to go. So I'm going to paste that in there. Now, let's go over the important points here. So, if you've been playing with Autogen at all, or if you followed the last video, this should all look really familiar to you. So I'm just going to hit some things of note. So, first thing that we're doing up here, we are importing both the console print function and the JSON schema for it from our functions.py file. Here we are, importing our OAI config. There's nothing new there. Like we said last time, Autogen and the GPT Assistant API have the ability to create new assistants on the fly. Right here, I'm specifying an assistant ID of none. That means that when I create a new GPT assistant, it's going to make a brand new one in my OpenAI account. Now, if you don't want that, maybe you already have one pre-made that you want to use here. So you would give your assistant ID right here, and then when we make a new GPT assistant later on in the code, it should create an instance of your existing agent. So we're not going to do that here. We're going to leave the ID as none, so it's going to make a brand new one for us right here, right now. So we're going to go ahead and give that to our LLM config. We're going to give our config list to it. And now something new is we're specifying an array of tools. Now this is important. You see that the array of tools contains a single object. The type is function, and the function is our JSON schema for the function that we want to call. Now, I think that you could probably define several different functions here. If you had maybe 3 different things that you needed to call, this is where you would put all of the definitions. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to take this LLM config and we are going to create a new GPT Assistant agent with that config. We're going to give it a name, Console Assistant. We're going to give it some instructions. Hello, Console Assistant. You'll print a curated selection of words to the console. Please carefully read the context of the conversation to identify when you should do this, and let the user know when the words have been printed. The next thing that is very important, you can see right here, console assistant.register function, and I'm giving it a function map. And I'm saying that console print API maps to console print. Now remember, I'm going to go back to functions.py. Here's our function, console print. Here is our JSON schema, console print schema. And here's the name that we're giving in the schema, console print API. So we're using all of those things here in function calls. So in the function calls.py file, we are specifying tools, function. Here's the console print schema. Now, our GPT assistant is going to know the schema for our function, and so it's going to know about this name, console print API. So we're telling it here, when you think that you should call this function, here's where the actual function lives, console print. So it's literally going to call this function in our code. It's about as simple as that. Everything else here should look very familiar to you. Here's our user proxy agent. We're initiating the chat, and then we are calling delete assistant. This is another important thing. When you create a new GPT assistant, that is going to either use an existing one that you already have in your OpenAI account, or it's going to create a brand new one on the fly that lives in your account. Now, if you don't want that, if you don't want your assistant to persist, you can call delete assistant, and that's going to permanently delete it from your OpenAI account. Now, be careful with this, because if you've pre-made an assistant that you use here, maybe you want to delete it, maybe you don't. So be careful about how you use this. Again, if we're creating an assistant on the fly, maybe you want to keep it, maybe you don't. This will delete the assistant when this code is done executing. So we've done a lot of setup here. So before I run this, I'm going to go down here to the lower right-hand corner, and I'm going to make sure that Conda environment that we created at the very beginning, I'm going to make sure that that is selected here. So I'm going to click on it if I don't see it, and it's going to drop down a list of environments that my system knows about. Now, if you don't see your Conda environment, you can hit this refresh button up here, and it should appear. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that our environment is selected, and I'm going to go up to the upper right hand corner and hit the run button and see what happens. Okay, so it's starting. And give it just another moment, and it looks like it's done. Let's make this a little bit larger. Okay, so you can see first line here, assistant ID was none, creating a new assistant. So this just made a new GPT assistant in my OpenAI account. So first thing, the user proxy says, please print a curated selection of words to the console. We can see right away the GPT assistant says executing function console print API. That's the name of our function right there. So it knew that it needed to do that. Now, we can see on the very next line, this function has been called with the following words: curated selection of words, innovative, serendipity, quintessential, so on and so forth. That is proof that our assistant called this function. This function has been called with the following words. And we see that in our console output. So then the assistant says the curated selection of words has been printed to the console. And it looks like there was a little break in the conversation there. The user proxy sent a blank message. Not really a problem. We can figure that out later. And then last thing I want to highlight, the last line here, permanently deleting assistant. That is the last line in our code, deleting the assistant that we've made on the fly. So that's pretty much it. It's not a whole ton of code. It seems pretty straightforward, at least to me. There seems to be a lot of potential here, because the functions that you define, we're doing something simple here, console print, and we're just printing directly to the system terminal. Maybe you want this to be an API call. Maybe you have a library that you're using in your code and you want to call that. This is how you would do it. So have fun with this. Let me know if you make something cool. And just like in my last video, I would like to give a quick shout to Matthew Berman. His YouTube channel is where I learned a lot of this stuff. Like I said last time, if he's capable of teaching me, then he is absolutely capable of teaching you. Just like last time, I will put the code from this video in the description. Have fun with this, and I'll see you next time.